This was initially supposed to be just an all-in-one video, and then I kept writing and writing and writing. So today, we're talking about 15 combat tips for Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. Team building will come later. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage of Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, whether it be gameplay, guides, news, etc., then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, huge shout out to all of my channel supporters. I know my schedule got a little funky, so I didn't quite get to have the shout out in over the weekend as I usually do. We'll have that at the end of this video. And also, thanks to everyone who came out to the stream at time of recording last night, where we broke 1,000 concurrent viewers. First time ever. Absolutely insane. I cannot emphasize enough how absolutely insane that is. So thank you to all of you for showing your support and coming out and enjoying Tactics with me. We're going to be continuing to do so for a good long while. So today, 15 combat tips. We have a fairly wide range of things here, from the most absolute basics for the newest of folks getting into potentially their first Tactics game ever with this release of FFT, as well as old heads who want to kind of brush up on their skills a little bit, and people who maybe haven't played the game since they were kids back in the mid-90s. Hopefully there's something here for everyone. I have chapter titles, as always, in the description and in the play bar for the video, so you can jump around to what you want to see. Before we get to the first tip, do keep in mind that I am playing on Tactician difficulty in the enhanced mode of the Ivalice Chronicles. That said, all of these tips should largely be backportable to lower difficulties and the classic mode as well. I'll specify if that's not the case, but I don't think there really is anything that would be that much of a difference. But that way you know, if it works on Tactician, it's probably going to work on the lower difficulties as well, because that is the highest difficulty. Starting right off, I always like to start each of these videos with this. I always get some criticism for it, but I think it definitely bears repeating for the newest of players. Simply just divide and conquer, man. It's a classic of any sort of turn-based strategy game. If you can cut off one or two enemy units from the pack and gang up on them to bring them down quickly, you will get yourself a massive force advantage. An enemy that's alive on 1 HP can still hit you, can still move block you, can still potentially do some sort of spell to support their allies. That makes them dangerous. If you can take one dude, or two dudes, or monsters, or the like, and just take them out, it's going to really put the enemy on the back foot. Maps in Final Fantasy Tactics are fairly well set up for this, with lots of terrain and choke points and ways you can kind of outmaneuver the enemy, draw them into traps, and then close ranks around them. So if you have the opportunity to do so, take it. It will absolutely make your life significantly easier. Number two, another simple one, but one that actually came to me in my early days of playing Final Fantasy Tactics, courtesy of my dad: let the enemy come to you. There are a lot of maps where if you just charge straight ahead into the fray, the enemy will very easily get the drop on you and get the first hit, which will again immediately put you on the back foot. There are certain maps in particular where there are enemy mages who are just relishing the potential opportunity for you to walk into their range and for them to then drop nukes on you. There's certain summoners on certain maps that will absolutely take advantage of you being a little too enthusiastic about charging up the front line. So, when you have the opportunity, hang back, let the enemy come to you. Not only does that keep you out of their range, which is very nice, it also gives you a turn or two that I call a staging turn, where you can actually apply buffs, focus, put on haste, maybe start charging some other spells, apply protect, all sorts of different fun stuff that you can do as you get more and more powerful characters, and then you can go into the fight even more prepared than if you just went in screaming and flailing your arms around. It's a very simple concept, but one that I see people kind of fail to realize more often than you would expect, especially if they're new. Number three, make sure that you are facing the enemy whenever possible. Do not show your back to the enemy. It's a classic of any sort of martial training across the entirety of human history, and it's still true in our video games today. The big reason that this matters in Tactics is because you do get better evade rates if you are being attacked head-on as opposed to the side or the back, especially if you have cloaks, shields, and the like. Whether this means that you're forming battle lines with your troops so that no one can actually get to your sides, or you're positioning yourself intelligently in the terrain, or you just know, well, I'm going to get approached no matter what. Better to actually make it so that my head is facing towards the enemy so I can see what's about to happen to me. It's simple, but again, thinking about how you're positioning yourself and if you're actually going to be able to get proper facing going on is a very simple thought process to train yourself to do, so that you wind up taking less damage and potentially evading more hits over the course of the entire game. The sooner you start doing it, the better. Alongside this, number 4, attack from behind whenever possible. If it's going to work on you, it's going to work on the enemy as well. And if you can get to their back to be able to hit them, especially with melee attacks, you will be far less likely to run into an enemy evading, parrying, blocking, etc. As someone who has ungodly amounts of hours in this game over all of its releases in the last almost 30 years, I cannot tell you the number of feels bads that I've had when I just kind of have to gamble on trying to hit an enemy from the front or the side, only to see them raise that shield or raise that sword or just dodge out of the way, and my entire attack has gone to waste. I have lost entire battles because of one parry or dodge. Do not leave yourself open to that if you are at all able to do so. Get those back attacks, as long as you're not putting yourself in an extremely vulnerable position to do so. For number 5, this is a little bit of a split between combat techniques and army building techniques, but I do think it bears to put here. Spam quick, cheap abilities like Stone, Focus, and Potion for easy JP gains. So we'll talk about this a lot more in the actual character building video, but I think it is important to discuss here since it is in combat. As you do actions, any action, you'll gain experience for your actual level and JP and job experience for your actual job or the class that you're in. Job points in particular are probably the single most important resource in the game, as they are what will allow you to not only learn new abilities, some of which can be very expensive in your current job, but also unlock more new powerful jobs as you proceed throughout the game. So, barring very specific circumstances where everything is like really down to the quick, like you need to be maximizing every possible action, not wasting time, using your most powerful skills every single turn. If you're not in a situation like that, taking the opportunity to be like, well, this character's not doing anything, but his buddy's missing 5 HP standing right next to him, we'll toss him a potion. Does he even really need that healing? No, but it does give your unit that XP and JP that is so vital. Same thing with stones. If you're not doing anything with your turn, toss a stone at your buddy for 4 damage. You'll get a bunch of XP and JP, and he's really not going to be any worse for wear. There's lots of little actions you can take like this as you actually move into engagement with the enemy to just continue to build your characters up and keep them from just sitting around doing nothing. A wasted turn is a sad turn, especially when you can be gaining a lot of XP. Number 6, charging characters take extra damage and are guaranteed to be hit. If you're not aware, there are certain spells and abilities that will cause your character to go into a quote-unquote charge state, where they'll take like a super Dragon Ball Z power-up stance and stare menacingly at someone until like their big attack goes off, right? This is one of the more interesting aspects of Final Fantasy Tactics overall game flow, in that your best abilities don't just trigger. You have to actually time them and plan for them, and most importantly, protect the character that is using them, because they are very vulnerable when they are charging an attack like this. You're guaranteed to be hit, you can't parry, you can't dodge, none of that, and you're going to take more damage if you are charging when you get hit, sometimes a significantly higher amount of damage. This of course means you can take great advantage of this fact. You're suddenly able to rush up on a vulnerable enemy who's in the middle of a charge, but it also means that if you leave like your squishy black mage vulnerable and there's someone with a sword that's going to run up on them while they're trying to cast Fire, you're probably not going to be casting fire because they're going to be dead on the ground. This is just a key thing to look out for, whether it's for protecting your own guys or taking advantage of what the enemy is doing to eke out that little bit extra damage that is going to sometimes be vital, especially if you're on Tactician. Next up, check the Brave stat on monsters and enemies that have reaction skills. The higher the stat, the more likely it is that they will be able to counter or do other reaction abilities. This is pretty self-explanatory. As you level up and get new abilities, you'll see you have reaction abilities. For example, Squires have Counter Tackle as your earliest example of a reaction ability. And each of these has their own formula for how quickly and how often they'll trigger. We're not going to get into that right now. The shorthand that you need to know is if an enemy has a reaction ability, their Brave stat is likely what's going to cause it to trigger. There's some outliers, but not that early in the game, and you'll know them when you see them. The biggest and most relevant time that you're going to want to pay attention to this is when you are fighting monsters, as all monsters come with the counter skill innately, which means they can just get a free full power attack on you if you attack them in melee. And especially on Tactician, they will hit you back really hard, probably harder than you're hitting them. So keep an eye on the little Brave stat. You can see it right here on the enemy's status bar. That will give you an idea of how likely they are to counterattack you. The counter skill itself is a flat percentage. So if something has a 48 brave, it has a 48% chance to counterattack you. Seeing as how monster stats are random, especially when you run into them in random battles or training missions, this is just going to be a good shorthand method to be able to tell if it's kind of safe, quote unquote, to attack a monster in melee, or if you want to whittle it down a little bit with magic or bows or even just thrown stones before you get in there with your sword and board, you know? Sometimes there's a goblin that'll have like 80 brave and he will slap the crap out of you. You will be stunned 3 ways to Sunday and you won't even know what happened to you. So just keep an eye on that brave. Number 8, and speaking of archers, archers get longer range when firing bows from higher ground and less range when firing from lower ground. This is one of the only mechanics like this in the game, so I think it bears discussion early, especially because Archer is one of the earlier jobs you can get, and it got pretty significant buffs in the Ivalice Chronicles, so I actually do recommend spending some time with archers if you kind of dismissed them before. But whenever possible, you want to get your archer to the highest ground they can reach so they have maximum range over the battlefield. Some battlefields, like the Door to Trade City, if you actually get to the top of the main tower skyscraper with your archer, you can hit almost the entire battlefield. Effectively, the entire battlefield where enemies are actually going to be, which is obviously a phenomenal force multiplier. They can't get to you, and you're just able to rain arrows down from on high. It's very powerful. It's very fun. Really kind of a power fantasy, especially for me as an archery instructor. So put your archers on high ground whenever possible. If you're going to be charging up like a slope for a map, maybe don't consider bringing your archer at all unless you can see a very quick and easy way to get them on like a small outcrop to actually give them an equal range at the very least. Number 9, weather and terrain impact magic damage. This is an interesting one and one that people often forget about or don't realize at all. But this game has weather effects and different types of terrain for a reason, and one of the earliest ways that this is going to come into play is when you're looking at elemental magic, specifically thunder, blizzard, and fire with your black mages. Once you know what to look for, it is extremely simple. If it's raining, use thunder magic, it'll be stronger. If it's snowing, use blizzard magic, it'll be stronger. If you're in a desert or in a lava map, use fire magic, it'll be stronger. It's that simple. This is a nice, easy way to be able to boost your damage output, and let's face it, your black mages should have access to all 3 elements anyway, even if you wind up specializing them a little bit, which we'll talk about a little bit further down the line here. It's just a nice way to be able to be like, oh hey, it's raining in the Door to Trade City. Thunder! It makes you feel like an absolute badass when you do it, because the damage numbers really spike pretty decently. Number 10, always bring backup healers, preferably some items and some magic to diversify. This is most important on Tactician difficulty, but even on lower difficulties, you never want to find yourself in a situation where your one healer gets dropped either early in the fight or at a critical junction when you need them to heal or res somebody, and realize that you're pretty much up a creek without a paddle. I still, to this day, do this to myself because I get so lost in training, like, well, this character is going to have these specific skills to train, and this character is going to have these specific skills for their build. And then suddenly I realize I've got one dude with items, and he just got blown up by a monk. So don't do that to yourself. Always have at least 2 sources of both healing and revives on hand. This will get easier as you progress further into the game because you'll have more jobs that have some random access to this type of stuff. Having someone with some white magic and having someone with items, especially throw items, like even just straight up a normal chemist, will be a huge boon to you. Trust me. Do not neglect your healing. Number 11, if possible, let enemies fully expire so you can grab their crystals. It's just free abilities. Again, this kind of could go into the team building video if you wanted, but it's combat relevant, so we're putting it here. As you drop enemies, you'll see they get little hearts above their heads, right? And as turns go by, those hearts will tick down. If you haven't encountered this in-game already, once you lose all of those hearts and their turn comes back around again, one of 2 things will happen. They'll either turn into a treasure chest. If they're a human enemy, you'll get one of their pieces of gear at random, or if they're a monster, you'll get an item, or they'll turn into a crystal. For monsters, all this will do is restore your HP and MP when you step on it, which is huge. Don't get me wrong, like that. Yeah, all this will do. Trust me, and that is extremely good. And I have won fights off of the back of being able to get a clutch crystal grab. But what you really want to look for is a human enemy that you can inherit a bunch of skills from. This is a system that's evolved a lot over the years, but now it's just flat. Enemy has skills, you pick up its crystal, you can inherit every single skill that your character is applicable to learn. This can mean, especially later in the game, you have like a crystallized black mage and you walk up with a mage of your own who maybe hasn't done a bunch of black magic. You could just fill out like 3/4 of their spell list if you get lucky. And with the amount of time and grinding you have to do to unlock some of these abilities at any sort of like reasonable time frame, being able to just snatch them out of the ether like that is so awesome. It lets you do so much more with your characters. It is a huge power boost. So when you can, run out the clock, pick up some crystals, your characters will get a lot stronger, a lot faster. Number 12, shoot the medic. Whether he be a chemist or a chocobo, enemy healing is dangerous for you. Just like I was saying, it's very important for you to bring plenty of healing of your own. Any healers on the enemy team must be a priority target for you to bring down, especially if you're in a story battle where you're fighting bosses or anything. There's one particular boss battle against Weegraf near the tail end of Chapter 1 where he has a chocobo with him, and if you leave that chocobo alive and Weegraf has any amount of decent damage on him, it will run up and it will heal him, and it will heal him for more than you're comfortable with, given as how you're probably having a hard time damaging the guy in the first place. Same thing as if you're fighting a boss like a big powerful knight with heavy armor and they have a couple of priests and they start spamming cure on them. Or there's chemists running around throwing items. It's like, you can kind of get the combat flow going. Even if you're not doing a ton of damage, you can start chipping away at these major enemies, only to then have them get a big heal from out of nowhere. It is so rough to try and deal with, and it very well could end a fight for you. So whenever possible, bring down the healers. It'll make your life much easier. Number 13, know your target priority. Undead last, bombs first, etc. This is partially new to this version of Final Fantasy Tactics with the Ivalice Chronicles, as there are a bunch of monsters that have received changes to the way their core functionality is. However, at its baseline, there's always certain monsters, and certain enemies, but this is definitely key for monsters as well, where you want to be able to know what targets to bring down first. The reason for this is enemies like undead, like in pretty much all Final Fantasy games, once you down them, they have a chance to get back up. Once their hearts tick down, they could actually just stand right back up with full health, rather than crystallizing or turning into a treasure chest, which is nasty, because some of the undead enemies can actually be pretty rough, especially skeletons early in the game. So you kind of want to hold off on maybe downing them, put some damage on them so they're easy to finish, but then kind of let them run around and do their thing. While on the other side of the map, you're dealing with much more important targets like, say, bombs. Because bombs, again, in true Final Fantasy fashion, will self-destruct. Usually, in most games, and in past versions of FFT, this would mean that, they die, in the process dealing a ton of damage to you and your team. Not anymore. Now they just lose a chunk of their health and then keep on going and can potentially keep biting you or using other abilities and finishing off your now weakened allies. So, really, you want to drop bombs as quickly as possible. Like, if you're going to target a bomb, have everyone target it and just remove it immediately so it can't have the chance to blow up on you. There's, of course, a ton of different examples of this, bigger and tougher and scarier monsters and enemy humans that you will run into over the course of the game. You kind of have to learn this for yourself, but it is a very important thing to learn. Good target priority will make you take way less damage and potentially lose less characters over the course of a fight, or just make the fight go faster in general if you're dealing with a bunch of undead. Number 14, speaking of things like undead and whatnot, enemy weaknesses are key to exploit. Holy and healing on undead, ice on goblins and minotaurs, etc. This is a staple of all Final Fantasy games, and really, like most RPGs in general, if Pokemon says hello, where you will find, as you go through the game, certain monsters and enemies will be more or less vulnerable to certain types of elemental magic. Humans don't have any innate resistances or weaknesses, but can gain them due to their equipment, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. And then there are plenty of monsters that do have innate weaknesses and resistances. It seems like most of the time, Blizzard is your go-to. There are a lot more enemies that are weak to Blizzard than anything else, which makes it a very powerful set of spells to know. But there's always going to be edge cases or other elements that are more or less effective. So take your time, learn what seems to be doing more or less damage to certain types of enemies, and then exploit that as you go through the game, and monsters get scarier and scarier and more powerful. Of course, beyond just elemental magic, as mentioned, undead are weak to holy and healing. Again, classic to Final Fantasy. So if you have a really nasty skeleton that you're trying to finish off, maybe like you didn't really put too much damage into it because you're too busy killing everything else, but now he's bearing down on you, just huck a phoenix down at him. It'll one-shot him. Easy. Or just chip away at him with cure and potions. It'll do just normal damage. So take advantage of these different weaknesses. You're definitely going to be happy that you did. And finally, circling back around to charge. I left this one for last because it's a little bit niche. There's really no guaranteed way to make this happen, but it's still something to have in your back pocket as a little bit of a trick. You can break charge by pushing enemies. So again, we mentioned earlier the charge mechanic where you're charging up, you have your big attack or your spell or whatever it is that you're going to be casting. If you can't kill an enemy that's casting a big scary ability, try to push them. Skills like Rush or Throw Stone, if you're really in a pinch, even like a critical hit from a melee attack or a ranged attack, has the chance to actually push enemies around a square. And if you do that, it will break their charge, guaranteed. You don't even need to knock them off a cliff or whatever, just move them one to the side, their charge will break, and it'll be effectively like you just downed them. It's not something that you can really rely on, since there again is no guaranteed way, as far as I'm aware, and I know this game pretty well, to actually guaranteed push something, but there have been times where I've been able to save a character because I just did a Hail Mary rush with a Squire, and they knocked a Black Mage out of their concentration pose, and I didn't have Blizzaga dropped on my face. So just a good thing to know. The game doesn't really go into it too much, so fun little sort of pocket sand for you. And hey, if it ever winds up saving a fight for you, let me know down in the comments, because it's always fun to see people get excited about that type of thing. And that, my friends, is 15 combat tips for new and returning players for Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. This was a fun one to put together. I can't wait to do the character building, the team building one as well, because there's a lot to talk about there. And I mean, I could go on for so much more. There's so much to learn and discuss with Final Fantasy Tactics. So if you would like to see more videos just like this one, whether they be for combat or character building, or more specific guides on very narrow topics like Faith and Brave or whatever else, any sort of guide content that you would like to see from me, please do let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to get to it as quickly as possible. Thank you once again to all of my channel supporters, new and old, because boy howdy, there sure is a whole heck of a lot more of you than there was a few days ago, let me tell you. Thank you all, to all of you so very much. You help to keep this channel going through the ups and downs of the insecurity of the YouTube landscape, unfortunate as it is, so thank you to all of you for that support, and I very much hope to see all of you on tonight's stream. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Keep it tuned here for way more Final Fantasy Tactics guides, and until then, I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.